My name is Rosey Jecks, and I'm a National Technical Leader for Brown and Caldwell. I help cities transform their landscapes using green infrastructure and nature-based solutions for water quality, flood risk, and climate adaptation. Professor Hahn asked me to talk about the role of rainwater in a one water approach and describe some of the trends I'm seeing in North America. So One Water is an integrated planning and management approach for long-term resilience and reliability that meets the needs of communities and ecosystems. It's about managing all aspects of the water cycle from the top of the watershed to the bottom, encompassing all the natural and built sources and sinks of water. As Luna Leopold says, the health of our waters is the principal measure of how we live on the land. In urban areas, we are rebuilding our watersheds every day. Each time we pave a road, build a house, or plant a garden, we have an opportunity to slow, sink, cleanse, and infiltrate stormwater. Rainwater is the most unifying one water element in our communities. We can all agree that water doesn't follow jurisdictional boundaries and that watershed health and a one water planning approach cannot truly happen with our current regulatory and infrastructure paradigms. There are too few incentives to compel organizations to work together or to consider the full water cycle. Climate change is beginning to force these issues, but until we have new systems of governance and infrastructure funding, it's critical to think like a watershed, but to start where you are. Today, I'm going to discuss the trends I'm seeing in North American cities. These trends include integrated planning, using risk-based approaches to integrate water quality with flooding and sea level rise, and using social and economic factors in engineering analysis, and working across jurisdictions to create multi-benefit solutions to solve citywide problems. Several cities like San Francisco, California, Vancouver, British Columbia, and Seattle, Washington are opting to bring in a wider set of considerations into their planning and going beyond simple regulatory compliance. I'm working with the City of Vancouver on their sewer and rainwater management plan to integrate green and gray infrastructure for climate resiliency while seeking reconciliation with First Nations. Another trend that is worth mentioning is that engineering practice is beginning to integrate multiple forms of risk into decision-making. No longer is water management or flood management simply a technical consideration. We are using information on social vulnerability and economic factors to overlay these factors with watershed and infrastructure needs to identify opportunities for multi-benefit projects that reduce risk in the most vulnerable communities first. Seattle's Shape Our Water Plan is a 50-year integrated drainage and wastewater plan developed through a lens of racial and social equity to prioritize partnerships for green infrastructure and resiliency in vulnerable communities. They've hired a group of paid community members that represent various diverse communities to help design the stakeholder engagement for this plan to ensure that the recommendations are representative and reflective of community needs and priorities. Communities like Hampton, Virginia are saying that they can integrate flood resilience and water quality with other community needs, such as pedestrian safety, heat risk, park needs, and transportation improvements. And really the integration of these capital projects each time we touch the landscape begin to help improve on all fronts. Los Angeles is another example. They're home to the largest urban street network in North America, and we're working with them to look citywide to identify areas of overlap between flooding and stormwater management to priorities with other infrastructure risks such as sewer and water replacement, urban forestry needs, pedestrian safety, and urban heat risks. And when we overlay these with an equity lens, we can begin to reduce risk again in the most vulnerable communities. This one infrastructure planning tool allows the agencies to pool their funding and build back their streets better while providing efficient use of public dollars. So once you've conducted your watershed plan, identified your highest risk areas, you can identify where your watershed needs intersect with community priorities and develop projects that result in new landscapes and multi-benefit projects. I've got a very short amount of time today, so I'm going to quickly give you some North American examples of green and complete streets, floodable parks, schoolyards, and looking at new examples of funding and governance. These are two green streets. The first is on the left is in Cesar Chavez Street in San Francisco. And the second on the right is called the Swale on Yale in Seattle, Washington. Both nice examples of urban design, multi-benefit urban design. These projects are designed to reduce flood risk and protect against storm surge. The two projects, one in New York City and one in Norfolk, Virginia, are both shoreline projects that are designed to reduce the impact of storm surge and provide habitat and recreational value, as well as these multi-benefit flood strategies. And the right-hand side is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and this is a project that is inland that is using streets, runoff, and flood storm surge to be stored in local parks to help mitigate the impacts of sea level rise on the city. In San Francisco, they're reprioritizing their investments to look at schools first as a stormwater investment to really create low impact design in school environments that provide outstanding children's environments, as well as providing urban cooling and water quality benefits. In the bottom right-hand side is the city of South San Francisco, which is taking flow off a flood control channel and using it to irrigate a local park for groundwater recharge and to provide both community amenities for a new park, as well as reduced water quality impacts associated with the flood control channel. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, we really need to have new versions of governance and funding. Without these, we will not be able to achieve these goals of integrated planning and project delivery. So the project on the left is something that's a project sponsored by the World Resources Institute. It's called a Joint Benefits Authority. And this is a new funding and mechanism and governance tool for bringing together multiple agencies as well as community partners to pool their funding and to have ways of financing projects that have these multiple benefits. And on the right-hand side, this county of San Mateo, which is in California, has taken it a step further and created an entirely new merged agency for their entire county, which puts together all the planning and project delivery for flooding and sea level rise and water quality all into one agency. So while neither of these are perfect solutions to our problems, they both really start to show a path forward for how we can start adapting our governance structures, project delivery, and funding structures for climate resiliency. So I'm done with my examples for you today, but I'll leave you with my thanks and gratitude for your time. And here's my contact information if you have any further questions.